Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Founder Hour podcast. I'm your co-host Pat, and today on the show we sit down with Emily Schuman. Emily is a blogger, author, designer, and founder of Cupcakes and Cashmere, the premier destination for fashion, food, and lifestyle inspiration. What started out as a blog in 2008 as a way for Emily to document the things she loved has since grown into a brand that also carries hand-selected jewelry, accessories, gifts, and more. We spoke with Emily all about her upbringing and early career in advertising, why and how she launched her first blog, what ultimately led to it taking off, her thoughts on networking versus building genuine relationships, and much more. Here we go.
I have always been in California. I stayed in California for college and grew up in Mill Valley, which is just outside of San Francisco, and just, I guess, never wanted to leave. I am an only child, always was very focused on everything from academics and music and athletics, and went to college just to kind of explore whatever it was that interested me. I majored in sociology and media studies, both of which I had no idea how I would actually then apply those to any sort of like real life job. But that's kind of where that's where I began.
And like, I know you mentioned you had all these like different interests as a kid. Was there anything in particular you could like see yourself being or doing when you were like older?
When I was a teenager, I remember clipping out ads like in the magazines that I would read. And I knew that I wanted to do something creative and something involving advertising. It was around the time of like those Volkswagen Beetle ads and those Absolute ads where like the bottles would be kind of, I guess camouflaged in different settings. And I just remember thinking I could do something like this. And so that's kind of where the media studies angle came. And I was also always just very interested in magazines as well. I was like, I don't know if this could actually pertain to a real life job, but I, when I graduated from college, that was the first thing that I did, and worked at Condé Nast.
And did you know like anything about advertising as a kid, like even before high school? Like, did you have any parents or friends that were in the industry? Yeah.
My dad did work in advertising, so we would talk about it pretty extensively, and even his friends, people that were around us, I could kind of go and pick their brains about the things that they did, what they found was interesting, kind of where the landscape was kind of shifting and how things were moving. So yeah, and I feel like I definitely had a leg up in that I was able to talk to my dad about it as well.
Yeah, because it's always interesting like to know like what things you're exposed to as a kid, whether it's like through family or just mostly family at the time, because like this is kind of before the age of like really social media burgeoning.
Oh yeah,
and, like,
before.
What year was it?
When I graduated from high school?
Yeah.
Like I graduated from high school in 2001. Okay. So I mean this was well before anything.
I mean, really have access to all these.
There was no iPhone, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, please, like there was barely dial-up internet in those days. So
gotta put the CD-ROM into the computer.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, I was on AIM most nights. So yeah, this is really back in the day. And so just advertising in general even looked different, and it was very simplistic and straightforward. And so obviously it has shifted dramatically since then.
I just watched Mad Men like 6 months ago for the first time, and it's probably like one of my top 3 favorites.
So
shows
good.
of
That's
all
a
time.
good pandemic watch too.
It is, yeah.
And that's basically what it was like in 2001.
I mean, 100%.
1965
not that
and
different.
2001.
Not that different. Like
it
they didn't
changed
have
very fast.
Right, exactly. They didn't have computers on their desks, but everything else. I'm like, what did you do? What was in your briefcase? Like, what did you even bring?
Now it's like, oh, let me upload this ad to like Facebook and see how it's so different, right?
It's so different.
Crazy.
And it's crazy how easily you can also then track it. Because even when I worked in magazines, I worked at both Teen Vogue and Domino magazines, both of which were Condé Nast books. We didn't really know how things were actually performing, if people, in terms of the brand recognition, or if they led to any sales or whatever it was. It was just kind of like a shot in the dark. It's so fascinating that at the time, it just felt like, oh, of course, you get a page, you get a spread, whatever it is in a magazine. But other than magazine sales, you don't really have any clear understanding of like that correlation of how it then performed.
So what eventually brought you out to Los Angeles? Or Southern California?
Yeah, so Scripps College, where I went to school, which is part of a 5-college consortium, which is in Southern California, I graduated, and the next day I had my final interview at Condé Nast. So I had actually been going back and forth between the college campus and Condé Nast, the one in LA,
Right.
for several months leading up to my graduating. I didn't have one backup plan. Like I was like, I am going to be at Condé Nast. I absolutely loved, all of those magazines and whatnot. And so that was kind of the impetus for me staying. Had I not gotten the job, which luckily I did, I have no idea where I would have been today. I would have just gone home with my parents and lived in their basement forever. So
what was it about a liberal arts education though that was interesting to you? Because I know we were talking about it a little earlier before the podcast, that like Pat and I didn't frankly like know what those 5 colleges were. Like I didn't even know what a liberal arts college was, frankly. I just thought it was like where Democrats went to like learn how to do their business.
Like a lot of people that regret college these days like didn't go to like a
and look, I see both sides, because you both went to USC and you have, I assume, I mean, you're decked out in USC gear and like even
I didn't want you to call me out, but that's okay.
In the best way possible. I appreciate that you have that pride. But no, I mean, I think even for me, like not feeling that deep connection even to like a sports team. Again, I played 3 varsity sports in high school. And so the idea that like we didn't really have like a sports team. I don't have a sports team to follow or anything like that. So there are some pros and pros too. But
it's an expensive pride. It's an expensive thing to be proud about.
Sure. I'm trying, guys. No, but I knew that a lot of what they focused on was, the things like the sociology and the social sciences and just an intimate setting was really interesting and compelling to me. I went to public school up through high school. So it was the first time I was going to be in a private setting that was a lot smaller. And that intimacy really appealed to me. And that was one of the things that I loved most. I mean, it was beyond being like just a gorgeous campus, just that connection with my professors. Like I would go to their houses on the weekends to babysit their children, and like you run into people in the dining hall and have these small lectures and all of that. So that was what really appealed to me.
Were you social? Like were you outgoing? Were you like this big bubbly personality type person?
No. And I think in a lot of ways, that has remained the same in that I think I come across as very outgoing if people meet me, but in large crowds and that kind of thing, I'm certainly not, and I'm pretty introverted and shy. There was like a New Yorker article that several friends sent to me a few years ago that was basically like, the title of it was like, I'm not an asshole, I'm an introvert. And I was like, I've never felt so seen. so yeah.
Well, I think you're or you would be considered like an introverted or an introverted extrovert, or would it be an extroverted introvert?
I think I'm an extroverted introvert.
Right? Yeah, because that's the adjective describing.
Correct.
Introvert.
Yes, exactly.
There we go. My English had to
we got
get
there?
a quick refresher. I didn't go to Scripps, so it was just USC. They didn't really focus on English that much. So I assume you got the job at Condé Nast, or
got the job. Yeah, we celebrated with Genghis Cohen, which if anyone is in LA, they know like it's one of the best like Chinese restaurants. So like to me, still, I'll go get that dish when I'm like trying to like recreate some of that magic. But yeah, I got back in the car. My parents were literally just like hovering around, around the corner from the building. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm moving to LA. And 2 weeks later, I moved to LA. I literally didn't know a person, which is like one of the most like mind-boggling things now looking back I don't know how many years. But it just, I knew no one here and I just dove headfirst.
And so the job was based in LA?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And so I guess how did those first few, years, or I don't know how long you were there for, but while like starting a new job, but also being acclimated to this like whole different city that you didn't really know anyone in.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that people ask, I think, most frequently, because I now see myself as, not necessarily a native. I'm always like, no, I still have my 415 area code. Like I still very much, I feel most at home in Northern California and still associate that with home. But people do ask me how I kind of got to that place where I felt comfortable here and found my friends and all of that. So it took me a while. And I think my parents and friends were probably a little concerned at first because, like, it wasn't a seamless transition for me in that, like, on the weekends, I would go to the flea market. I would go to the gym. I would go to a bar and just, like, watch the A's game. Like, so I didn't really have, like, people here. And it just took time. I remember the first time a girl in the office, because there were other assistants around the same age, she asked me to go do something. And I was like, yes, let's do it. And then I met her friends, and it kind of spiraled from there. But anytime people are asking me if I have any tips for meeting new people, it's just to say yes. Be a yes person. Be that person who's always game to try new things, to meet new people, have those experiences. Because now I just have, so many incredible people in my life and that kind of thing. But it can take a while. And I try to, like, set the stage for that when people are like, I just moved here and I don't know anyone. I'm like, it took me, like, roughly 2 years to, like, really feel like I found my place.
I'm glad you're sharing that, because I think it's super timely too, because, like, now is a time, especially with, like, remote work, where people are kind of, like, able to live anywhere. And with cities like LA being so expensive to live in, people are kind of maybe afraid to move somewhere because of that, because they don't know anyone, right? But then something to just note is, like, it is going to take some time, but it'll happen as long as you're putting yourself out there.
Exactly. Be patient, be kind with yourself, and be a yes person. I mean, someone had asked me if I wanted to be part of an intramural soccer league, and I was like, great, love soccer, let's go do it. And I met a bunch of friends that way, and then once you meet those friends, you meet their, so it all kind of, like, can snowball. You just have to be open to it and getting out there.
It's also a good reminder for people, even in their later stage of their careers, where they have less time, they have more responsibilities with, spouses and kids and other projects, like, renovating a home, for example, and you run out of time. And so you kind of have to say no to things that you would have rather said yes to. But I remember recently somebody asked me, they're like, oh, Posh, how do you network? Like, I need you to teach me networking. And I'm like, I can't teach you networking, number one. But number two, it's like,
rule number one, don't call it networking.
Don't call it. Don't call it that.
Also, do not have in your email, I would love to pick your brain. Like, people are going to be like, I'm too busy now.
Whoever came up with that should go pick their nose. Like, it's I don't know what
that needs to be retired.
Yeah, it's like, ask a legitimate question. Don't like pick your brain. Just ask the question. Like, if you don't get an answer, you don't get an answer, right? Yeah. But I told him, I said, look, for me, when I was in college, I was always extroverted, but in college, when we went to USC, it was an opportunity to, like, meet people from around the world, around the states, around just different cultures, and you kind of you have to open up, or else you're kind of going to be the person that's left out. And you just always have to say, yeah, I'm down to talk to you for like 30 minutes. I'd love to learn about, because that's how you learn those experiences, or you're like, oh, that's an interesting career choice. Like, I had never even considered that, right? Or like talking to a liberal arts college student and being like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing, right? Like, kind of going outside of your comfort zone at times, even later in your career. You just never know where that next opportunity is going to come from.
I feel like networking is so different than, like, actually nurturing an actual relationship and friendship with somebody, because I feel like networking is more like that initial, hey, like, nice to meet you. What do you do? This is what I do. Exchange business cards, and then never talk to each other again. And people think, like, they're building, connections, but they're not really building anything at that point.
Correct.
It's more like, how do you have a genuine, and you're not going to get along with everybody, and not everyone is going to be something, that perhaps that you could provide value in their life in some way, and that's fine too. But if you do happen to come across someone that there's some synergy with, I mean, actually, like, try to develop that relationship. Keep in touch, follow up, like, make sure that you're spending time with them.
And no matter how you need to remind yourself, like, set reminders in your calendar. It can be 4 times a year or every other year, whatever it is. But the point that you brought up of, like, how can it also kind of work both ways? I think a lot of people kind of see networking, especially in the beginning, I think it can be kind of lopsided or imbalanced. And so you kind of always look to that one person to be like, hey, do you know anyone, or whatever it is? But I think it's always important to see if there are ways that you can help that person. Even if you're like, if you've just graduated from college and you feel like you don't have anything to offer, you might, and so just to always kind of at least make it
it's not even that
way.
You might, you probably do, like a lot of, like, younger folks, I mean, we're still we're like a confused age at this point, but, like, they ask, hey, like, what am I going to provide somebody who's like a 55-year-old, like, investor? And it's like, well, I'll tell you what you're going to provide them, right? They don't know on social media. They don't understand social media.
Right.
They don't understand some of the new technologies. They have money. They have, like, know-how, and they'll teach you that. But you might be able to provide them access to a certain group of people, or like a certain industry that you really know well,
or just
and like
energy.
Don't downplay that.
Energy.
Don't downplay that. Right? It's like a lot of people, I think, don't value themselves because they just don't know. And I think that comes with, like, we talk about it every single podcast. It's like just being exposed to different things and understanding, like, what value actually is. Like, I mean, you could look at this podcast and be like, what value does that carry? Well, it's like, okay, if we sit back, there's like been 200 and plus founders that we've had on this podcast that are all incredible people that's a lot of value, and I don't even know what that value is, right? But we can figure it out.
Well, and everyone can take what they will from it.
Totally.
Someone might listen to an episode and find nothing, and then the same episode, someone has taken 20 gems that they then add to their own.
We get that all the time, and we're like super confused. Like, wait, what happened here?
That didn't really go well. Like, it wasn't that great. And then you'll just hear like, dude, like we love that story. Like, wow, how, like resonated really. We're like,
the joys of social media, right?
Yeah, you're like, how'd that happen, right? Back to Condé Nast. How long were you there, and what did you even get out of it?
I was there for about 2 years, and if I'm being fully honest, I was a pretty mediocre assistant. Like, truly, I mean, I went to college and I was like, I'm faxing things, I'm creating media kits, I'm writing simple emails, answering phones. But what I did get from it was I had 3 bosses that I kind of reported into, and I learned, I would say the most important thing was to be proactive. Because I was someone who was always worried about making mistakes. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So like my fear of failure runs deep. And so when I first started, I was always kind of like teetering around things, being like, hey, and I would go into her office, like always timid. And hey, I just wanted to say like, you know, I'm working on this for you. And is this right? Or I just want to make sure if this was the way you were thinking. And she had, I think, just such an impressive, she wasn't that much older than me, and yet I got so many like just nuggets of wisdom from her. But she was basically like, you need to find out all of the information you can. You need to be way more proactive, because all of the questions that I was asking her, I could have answered by myself.
Right.
And so I think that's the biggest takeaway that I got from it, amongst like many other things, like that you need to work harder, or if you are over a job, leave before you get to the point where people are like, hey, are you over this? Because like that's not a good place to be. And I certainly pushed that. But that was one of the most helpful things to this day, that just like I have like a proactive, like I will not stop. Like if there is something that I need to figure out, like going back to the beginning of my blog, I started Cupcakes and Cashmere in 2008. And at the time, blogs were just kind of, becoming a thing. I had zero background in any of this. And I remember when I was creating my first layout, I wanted to make my header clickable on any page, and it just didn't happen. And I could have probably asked for help, but I was like, no, I can probably figure this out. And I was like a back end like coder, and it took me 3 days. And this was when I was, I mean, I think that like someone in IT could have done it in 30 minutes or 3 seconds, to be honest. Yeah. But it was one of those things that I felt such pride in the fact that I was like, no, I figured this out myself. And it's, I think, been like part of kind of the backbone of like my business.
Well, it's all about those like little wins, right? Like it's more so the mindset than the actual thing.
Right.
If you did that one thing, you're like, well, I can do the next one, and then that's another little thing to somebody else or to you too, but then it just keeps adding up, and then you realize, wow, those little wins were just like now a massive thing.
They add up.
You got to start somewhere. Everybody's got to start somewhere. Nobody started off being Mark Zuckerberg, right? Like you got to start doing something stupid, something small, something useless, and then out of nowhere, sometimes it just gets bigger.
I love that. And just to kind of play devil's advocate, I feel like there's also a time and place where it is good to like ask for help.
I also learned that
because I'm very much like that. Like I try to do everything on myself, but then I realize like, oh wow, if I could have just asked this person for some help, maybe it would have saved me so much time.
I mean, 100%. And that's something that I learned like later in my career, once I was way more established and kind of had built up more of like a sense of self and confidence, that I then could ask for like, it was almost like that I was granting myself permission to ask for help. And I to people who are kind of more in the like early stages of their career, you don't need to get to that place to ask for help. It's just
because it could seem like you're inconveniencing somebody, but at the end of the day, it's almost like they might feel like honored that you're coming to them and asking them for help because there's some expert on something that, and the fact that they're helping you, I think could bring some fulfillment in in their own life. So and going back to like what we were talking about with developing relationships, like it is an interesting way to collaborate or work together on something. So something to think about,
Speaking of the blog, you said 2008, so it was not too long after you left the job. What was it? I mean, what did you even think, or why did it start?
I was really bored at my job. I had moved from magazine sales to online sales, and I was managing advertising campaigns at AOL.
Amazing.
And
fun.
it was certainly, yeah, I was managing like Boot Barn, like ad campaigns. It was a thrill. And I was not.
But talk about knowing the audience. I mean, like, it's a very specific target audience.
It leans a little more, it leans pretty Western.
Yeah.
And
it's like Trump's demographic. Like, I think Trump used it as like his like custom audience on Facebook, like Boot Barn.
I'm pretty
followers.
sure
Yeah.
they're
Lookalike
one. They're one in the
lookalike Boot Barn.
They're
for
one
sure.
and the same.
Yeah.
So I was just really bored. I didn't feel like I was being challenged in the slightest. And I would kind of finish everything I needed to get done by like mid-morning. And I was like, cool, now what?
Yeah.
And it was actually my husband who started a blog with a friend. I think they wrote a total of like 6 blog posts.
And you guys are married at the time?
No,
Okay.
I actually met him when I was at AOL. He was a client.
Okay.
I did get the okay from my boss to then like take that relationship to the next step. But I was taken off his campaigns. Yeah. But it was one of those things that he started his own blog about Scotch. He's like a Scotch connoisseur.
Oh, wow. We gotta talk Scotch.
Yes, I'm sure he would absolutely love that. But I think he soon found that he created a little bit too niche of a subject, and so it like petered out pretty quickly. And I was like, gosh, like what if I were to write about things that I'm excited about? Just like and at the time, a lifestyle blog was not really a thing. Right. It was like choose a lane. Are you fashion? Are you food? Are you beauty? And I didn't want to. Well, I had also seen how quickly he had petered out based on how narrow, a focus he had. So I wanted to then set myself up for success to write about things that I loved and wouldn't get tired of. So that's kind of where Cupcakes and Cashmere started. I spent about a week coming up with the name, even though I had at that time, besides I would say like, I don't know, Perez Hilton or like TMZ, it's like there weren't professional bloggers. So it really came from like a truly like just creative, inspired.
Was it like Blogspot or Tumblr or something else?
It started on Blogspot for sure.
Okay.
And then we like moved from there. But yeah, it was like, or WordPress. One of the two. I think we started, I started on Blogspot and then went to WordPress. But yeah, it was just one of those things that there were hints that it could be something bigger down the line, even though again, at the time, like I had no trajectory. I had no hopes of anything other than creating an idea of what I could work towards of like, okay, during the week, I'm going to write 1 blog post a day. And that was it. That was like, those were my goals. But even in coming up with the name Cupcakes and Cashmere, I wanted it to be alliterative and speak to the things that I was going to be writing about, namely fashion and food.
And were people interacting with your posts at the time? Like, how did people find out about it?
Oh my gosh, not at first. I mean, it was like my parents and my now husband. Please, like that was it. I felt like I was bribing my friends to like come. I mean, let alone get like a comment. No, it was. I would also then spend, I think, roughly an hour a day. I'd read some book on SEO. That I then would spend an hour each day commenting on other blogs. And then I would do things like, hey, I'll put your blog on my sidebar if you put, and like, if we like do that exchange. I mean, truly, that literally was what we did back in the day. It was like the Wild West. No one knew what we were doing. And over time, it got traction and people started reading it and people started coming and commenting. And it really just kind of grew from there. But it was not overnight. Again, like going back to the making friends and feeling like you can just, acclimate into a city immediately. It took a while.
Yeah.
You said something before you started talking about this, which was that when you saw your husband's blog about the Scotch and how narrow it was, you wanted to make yours more successful. But at the time, how did you define that success? Did you know that there was going to be another step, or you just wanted to be a successful blog?
Yeah, and when I say, like, even saying success, to me it was more of just, like, I wanted to still be able to write about things. I didn't want to get tired of it or grow bored of it.
Like, run out of content.
Yeah, I didn't want to run out of content, like, 2 weeks in, being like, cool, I'm only talking about, like, knee-high socks or something. Like, here we go. Like, so I really tried to set myself up just so that it would be something that I could write about for a long time. But no, success, I never even thought I could make money from it, like turn it into anything else, so that was truly just to not become too bored and just.
What was was there like a challenge early on in terms of actually coming up with the content? Like, was it were you like are you naturally a good writer, like coming up with like curation, like all that stuff? Like, was that something that you had to kind of overcome, or did it come naturally to you?
It came pretty naturally in the beginning, and it was just such a high to be doing anything that just felt like it was a challenge and that I was excited about. And, I would say I found my voice, I would say, relatively quickly. And part of the reason that I started the blog was because I was always that go-to person that people came to, whether it was at my job or my friends, that if they were looking to go to a cool new restaurant on a Friday night, or like, hey, I want to get like a little sweater for something, like, where have you seen anything good lately? I was kind of that go-to girl. And so I decided to kind of parlay that into something that, like, I saw it more for like an advice place almost, where I'm like, hey, this is a great sweater that you should get, or I really like this. It wasn't very personal in the beginning, and I did that intentionally at first just to almost like create a little bit of distance, but over time,
Personal to you.
personal to me.
Yeah.
But over time, I would like do little hints of things, and people really responded well to that, and I really enjoyed it. I loved kind of sharing some of my actual personal anecdotes or how I was feeling or what I was doing. So it kind of then began to morph a bit over time.
And this was like, so 2008, 2009, this was like still kind of MySpace was kind of like dying out, and Facebook was coming in. And then
Well, the
obviously,
iPhone had just like
yeah, and then 2011
nine, yeah.
ish, you had Instagram, and then a couple years later, Snap, and all these different social platforms. Twitter was, 08, 09 was like really taking off. Did you start leveraging social media at that early on, and how did that go in terms of getting your audience there? Yeah.
I have never been a quick adapter to things, especially like new forms of social media. So really, again, grateful for my husband, because he's always been the one who's kind of like, hey, I know that you think that blogs are going to be the thing forever, but you know what we should also consider is doing things so that they're mobile friendly and incorporating video and taking advantage of some of these social media platforms. So I am always slow to embrace change, but in the beginning, I used them in the sense where I would like copy and paste and be like, new post on Twitter and new post on Facebook. And still to this day, one of the ways that I've kind of created boundaries for myself, one of many ways that I at least try to do, is that I can only focus my attention in so many places. So still to this day, it would probably be Instagram is still like my primary focus of like where I spend the majority of my time in terms of social media.
I don't mean to sound mean or like an asshole, not to you, but just in general to the population.
Sure.
But it's very surprising to me, I guess, looking back, that the same audience now, like just us as human beings, was the same audience that was reading like blog posts. I mean, did our attention span go from like a little higher to non-existent? Like,
Yes.
I mean, like, were people actually reading the posts?
They were on mine. I mean,
Yeah.
you could dive into the analytics, and I think it was one of the ways that I had almost like a leg up in the sense that I worked in advertising. So I would take deep dives into my Google Analytics and see
Right.
how many visitors I had on any given day to
Right.
see the content that they were interested in, how long they were spending on each post, like what they were clicking on, what they were buying,
Right.
all of those things. So people they stayed, and they will still stay, just in a really different way. But it's funny. I mean, my friends and I joke about like, we'll send each other articles.
No one's reading
And
it.
I'm like, did you actually read the article, or did you just look at the headline? Like, and so
Yeah.
I do feel as though our attention span, it worries me. I mean, as a mother to a 6-year-old little girl, I'm
Right.
just like, it's really important to
Right.
really take your time and slow down, especially just these days. It's just like all so ephemeral, and you're always jumping from one thing to the next. I think it's really important. And one of the reasons why I guess we've still maintained the blog, and albeit in like a much less focused way, but just because I think there is still a lot of good in some of these like longer form
Totally.
posts that can't.
I agree, and I think it really depends on what you're trying to communicate. Like sometimes
Yes.
a photo can just do it justice,
Yep.
but sometimes you need like a longer form explanation
Yeah.
of something. And
You
I
can
think
do video.
I think as a creator, it just the challenge is like, how do I get this message across in the least amount of words possible that is engaging, but also like we have to do it justice and explain what
Right.
this is, right? So
Yeah. So, and sometimes that'll be in stories. Sometimes that's going to be in a video or a blog post or whatever it is. But yeah, knowing, being able to kind of curate and figure out what makes the most sense on any given platform is kind of a daily struggle.
When you did switch over to social media, at that point, did you already have a big enough following where you were making money?
Yes. So I left AOL about 1.5 years after I started my blog. I was there for about 2 years. And I left when I was able to basically match my salary with ads on the site. So yeah, at that point, it was also kind of simultaneously. I was starting to grow Twitter and Facebook. Instagram wasn't quite a thing, I don't think yet.
Not yet. No.
Yeah.
And were they ads that you were like physically going out and getting, or was it like a Google AdSense type of integration?
No, I went out and got them because I understood how it was. So I understood like a CPM basis or a CPA, all those things. And so I then would approach brands and offer them a really, I feel like favorable and mutually beneficial, and a lot of them were just there all month. And I would just work with like one brand, and they had like the 728 by 90 and the 300 by 250. And so I was able to then kind of use that knowledge that I had to then kind of be able to just focus on creating content.
Because like at the time, was like influencing a thing? Like
No.
There were no influencers, right?
That was not a thing. It was not a terminology. And it's funny because I feel like I did so many speaking engagements at the time where I was like trying to share like the worth, because I understood it pretty well. And still people were like, hey, would love to work with you. We can pay you in some eyeshadow. And I was like, no, this is not how it's going to work. Like, I know my value. And so in a lot of ways, I feel like I was not necessarily, I was part of the crew that was kind of paving the way, but like a guinea pig in a lot of senses as well, where I look back and I'm like, gosh, they like really took advantage of us there. But, finding your voice is a really important part of growing up and standing up for yourselves. And it wasn't always popular when I would push back, especially on these larger brands, to say like, no, I know my worth and I need more than just eyeshadow.
And on that note, something I'm curious about is, as let's say you start developing like a platform and a voice and start getting some interest from brands and they're paying you and all that stuff, I feel like a lot of times we see it often where it kind of starts becoming less like natural and less genuine when you're like promoting something.
Yeah.
And the followers just kind of fall off and don't really engage anymore. How have you been able to maintain that like authenticity throughout it all when you have like brands that are willing to pay you, but maybe you want to feature certain brands that aren't paying, or you know what I mean? Like, how do you maintain that balance?
It's an intricate balance. And, I think that as long as you are working with brands that you believe in, that you love, that you would most likely buy on your own if you weren't, working with them or getting paid, that's the most important thing when it comes to partnering with these brands and for these like paid advertisements. But it's funny. It's like, I remember the first like paid opportunity that I did. And like most of the people were like, this is awesome, especially because like we had this incredible videographer and we did these series. But there are also going to be those people who are like, you're a sellout. I'm like, cool. And it's one of those things that you kind of have to know you can't please everyone. That's been like a hard lesson for me, but I think a really important one, both in business and in life. And that there are going to be people who are going to be along for the ride, understanding that it's a business. And in order to then provide them with all the content that they get on the blog, on social media, like day in and day out, that in the same way that people watch TV, you either have to subscribe and pay to not have commercials, or you're going to have some commercials. So like, to me, it's just part of it. And I think as long as you can still also have a lot of other moments in which you are not just promoting things and that you're connecting with people and still kind of going back to some of those core tenets to like what they fell in love with, then that's all you can do.
If you really think about it though, like from a macro level, what are now called influencers let's take the fashion space, for example, right? Which obviously, you're involved with. But Nordstrom or Macy's is that quote unquote influencer that is advertising and selling all these different brands in their physical stores. Mm-hmm. So these folks that are doing it on their own, like yourself and many others now, are just, they're either the Nordstrom, the Macy's, the Neiman Marcus, whatever they are, but as an individual doing it on their own and curating all these brands that at the end of the day, they're trying to sell. Nordstrom's in the business of business. Like, yes, you love Nordstrom. Yes, you love Emily, but at the end of the day, like, both of them need to survive and they need to make money. So it's like, I don't understand why people think it's a negative when you're selling something that you maybe wouldn't buy on your own. You know what I mean? Like, how do people overcome that? Or do you think people will eventually overcome that? Or have they already overcome it?
I think that you either get on board or you get off. And I think, if you are looking for to follow people who are not ever promoting things, then most likely it's not a business, and they will have a much smaller following, which does not equate to quality, of course. Like sometimes it does. There is a correlation, certainly, but like it doesn't necessarily mean that someone with like 3,000 followers like isn't worth it. To me, it's oftentimes if you get someone in the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, then it is most likely something that they are doing as a business. And in order to maintain a business, I think people have certainly a better understanding of it now, but you're always going to get pushback. And so it's, for me, the way that I see it is that I might lose people throughout the process who are like, I miss Emily like from 2008. I'm like, you mean the 24-year-old? Like,
also, you mean the one that like, if had I not made money doing this, could I still do this and support myself?
Yeah. So I feel like, and it's hard and it's complicated and it's nuanced, but I'm 38 years old and I'm now married and I'm a mother and a business owner and I have 10 people working for my company. And so I think that there's oftentimes a lack of understanding of like how certain businesses are run in those cases. And so I don't, it's not my job to then convince people to stay if they are turned off by advertisements. I totally get it. And maybe it's not for them, but there will always be other people who see, I think, the value in following.
Was there like a breakout moment, like when you knew, or it was just very apparent to you at that point that this could be something like that you do forever?
Yes. It was when I did a collaboration with Coach and designed a bag with them. And this was, I think, 2009 and then kind of went into 2010. And I remember printing out the contract in the mailroom at AOL, terrified, like completely just like convulsing, shaking. I was so worried. And because people knew that I had a blog, but I don't think they had any clue that I was like starting to monetize it and that it was my main, once I started, it was really, I think it was my husband who, again, he was a director of media at an advertising agency and was like, look, I don't know, it was probably a year in, and he was saying, if you got to probably like 1 million page views a month, you could make this happen. And so I don't remember exactly.
That's a lot of views.
It was a lot of views. And I remember thinking it was a big enough goal, but something that I felt was attainable. So at that point I was just like head down again, still like didn't think anything of it beyond just writing the blog or that kind of thing. But that's kind of what I used as my kind of like inspiration, what I was like moving towards. And, but I remember when I did print out that contract, just being like, oh, and then the bag, I think it was almost $500 and it was a light pink bag.
I have a burning question.
Please.
How did you convince Coach to design a bag?
I didn't convince them of anything. They came to me.
They approached you.
Almost all of my opportunities, and this perhaps highlights a lack of go-get-emness in myself or something, but if I'm looking back at the big opportunities in my life or through my career, Coach came to me. My literary agent, who I wrote 2 books with, he was at CAA, and I worked with Abrams. They came to me. I did a collaboration with Club Monaco, and I had a capsule collection, my clothing collection. Like, all of those things kind of fell onto my lap. So I didn't seek them out. They came to me.
The only reason I'm asking, because that specific like one was like so early on, like it was like 1 year, I think, or into the blog, right?
Yeah.
And so like how did they even, I mean, I don't know if you ever asked, but like, how did they even find out about you? Like, why did they want to approach you versus maybe some like designer who's, been in the game for a long time and, just curious.
Yeah. So, Raina Pinchansky, who now runs DBA, which is, a talent agency that I have been with for years. She was with Coach, and she was, I would say, pretty much the pioneer and the one who really saw the value in influencers way before anyone else. I mean, at the time, again, people saw it as this like really flippant, cute little thing. And she saw the sales numbers that people were driving. She saw the audience. She saw all of those things that other people just kind of I think brushed off. And so she approached 4 and kind of led this whole thing of approaching 4 different influencers. And it was a massive success. And I think the turning point for how people started to see influencers.
Yeah, I love that. I love that story because we had Ronnie Fike from Kith on the show not too long ago. And similar thing with him, like he very, very early on in his career, like he designed a shoe with Asics. And it's like, I think people think that you need to be this like super crazy like, experienced designer to be able to do these like awesome things, but you just have to have the conviction like you did, but also really like provide that value, and sometimes they just come knocking on your door, and you can never like ever plan that.
No, 100%. And I think that those moments have been some that I have felt like the imposter syndrome where I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, this is so ridiculous. But then those are the things that can really launch a career. And, what I will also say to that is that it's not just about how big you are, how many followers you have. It's the quality in terms of
Right.
like, are they people who are shopping? Like, and we even looking at our audience, like we have a very loyal following and they like to shop. They're similar to me. And so, you could find someone else who has millions of followers, but they like might not translate in an opportunity with this guy with like doing ASICs. Like he was the right, even if he didn't seem as big or, but he was able to then, make it work.
Well,
So.
what this reminds me of is kind of the popular phrase like build it and they will come, right? You built this audience like naturally, organically by writing about stuff that you enjoyed. The readers came and then, the businesses followed after that. And so I think the lesson that is learned from this, for me at least, is a lot of times people overthink, well, I have this business idea, I have this product idea or, service idea that I want to do, but who's going to buy it or who's going to use it? It's like sometimes that overthinking just kills an idea. And you don't even know who wants that. You don't know who needs it, right? Like there is some aspect of like, timing, sure, and like intelligence.
Yeah.
The other thing is just like you got to put it out there and you'll probably pretty instantly know whether or not it's working or not, right? Sure, don't give up instantly, but you'll know if there's some sort of interest, like whether it's 10 people that are super believers, evangelists, and they go out and become, your influencers out there and can help you sell stuff. But it's like sometimes it is build it and they will come, Other times, sure, you got to put some thought into it. Like, should I build like an oil well for the water, like for the beach? Like, I think there was like a Shark Tank like pitch one time. Like some guy built like an oil well and like was like, I'm gonna put it in the ocean and dig gold up or something. It was a gold well, stupid, right? But like
Shark Tank.
other things, it's like, if you just know that there's certain people like you that can do it and that need it, just try. I mean, like, you have nothing to lose but time and energy,
Right.
And it's like, for me, like that's the lesson I learned from like that story or just your inception. But so
I know you said you kind of fully took the leap and left AOL like when you sort of matched your salary, but were you like afraid at all? Like, is this sustainable? Is this not going to last?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I was terrified, and the timing worked out well because they were offering voluntary layoffs at the time. So I would have like a 3-month like little cushion of like, and I was like, all right, in 3 months, if this thing goes to shit and like nothing comes of it, got it. Like I will go find another job.
Yeah.
And almost immediately, and I was really scared to take that leap. It was one of the scariest times of my life. Like I didn't sleep for weeks. I was just going back and forth, and I waited until the very last possible day that you could like click on that submit button. And the minute I did it, I knew just with every fiber of my being that I made the right choice. And so I like some of the advice that I have been given is to just like, you always have to bet on yourself.
Yeah.
And it sounds pretty basic, but like I have gone through times that have certainly been scarier than others of being like, oh my gosh, like how are we going to pivot here? Like even when the pandemic hit, like we had like a clothing line and shoes and all of these things. And even with our shop, which is now like one of the biggest parts of our business. And we were like, got it. We're going to pivot. We're a small company and people are not leaving their homes right now. So like, how can we bring comfort there? And so we went basically and all into like loungewear, candles, jewelry, so that you could look kind of cute on your Zoom calls. And like that has now actually like maintained and the core part of our business. So, it's just always being willing to pivot and, just bet on yourself.
Emily, when did it just go from you to deciding, and I assume this was later on, but I need other people to help me build this to something beyond just Emily?
Yeah, I think it was probably 2012. It was pretty soon after my husband and I got married, and he left his job. And then I think probably within that year or so, we hired our first employee who kind of was a jack of all trades, if you will. She was like helping photograph things and helping do some web design and that sort of thing. And it's just kind of grown progressively since then. I mean, when we first started, it was really just the blog. And now we actually don't even have like a full-time blog writer anymore. Several of us contribute and we have outside contributors as well, but our main focus really is on our e-commerce.
So one thing anytime we've talked to, like, for example, like someone who's like a creator or they've created a business out of their kind of unique skill or vision or something, we always like to ask, like, how does this sort of transcend you? Because a lot of it is very dependent on you, right?
Yeah.
Like in the beginning, you're the curator, you're the creative, and then as soon as you start getting bigger, you just don't have the time to do it anymore. And so how have you been able to make that happen with adding more and more people to the team and trying to make this like something that kind of outlives you?
Yeah, I mean, it's our biggest struggle just because I can certainly be a bottleneck in almost all aspects of our business. But B, one of the best pieces of advice that my dad gave me was to hire people smarter than you. And so I am surrounded by just an incredibly bright, creative, scrappy team. And so everything from, I used to do all the photography. We now have several people who are exceptionally better at photography than I am and, are great at marketing and great at things that, one of the things that for me that was almost a challenge was I basically went from being an assistant at both, Teen Vogue and AOL to then being like a CEO founder. So I missed some like pretty integral steps in there of like climbing the corporate ladder, which is why, hiring people that are just really bright and understand, like that have great taste. So like our buyer and our planner for all of those things, are just so integral to our company's success.
Yeah.
As I was saying before the podcast, we had asked folks to ask, questions or what they would want to know about you. And regarding this issue, like not issue, but regarding this topic of teams, one of them had said that it's at a point now that like she follows team members of yours. And I think Jessica Kane was someone they mentioned, who I do not know who Jessica is.
She's the best. You really should.
Yeah, I should know who she is. But I just wanted to be honest there. How did that happen where your team members became, influencers in their own right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, some of them came with, large followings even before arriving. Jess was one of them. But, it's a platform that I have been really happy to kind of just hand over to people. And especially now, not just beyond, not just within our actual team, but to outside contributors as well. And so that has just kind of gone on. But again, I think it speaks to how well we've hired because these women are just exceptional and they're smart and they're funny and they're creative. So it would then make sense that once people have been introduced to them, that they would want to follow them themselves.
Right. And throughout the last, I'm going to try to do my math right here, 12 years, right? Like you've obviously grown personally, professionally, like have a family, have a home. Like how did your content change during the last dozen years now?
I mean, when I was 24, I mean, I was going to the flea market and get it. Like all of my furniture was from the flea market or a Forever 21 or that kind of thing. And, I was just learning how to cook. Like I literally had no idea how to cook before, really starting the blog, and it kind of like prompted that. So, going from that to then furnishing our first apartment that we moved in together to, getting married and to buying a house and having a child. And, I have really, I think, in one of the sweetest compliments people pay me is that they're like, I feel like we've grown up together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because, those are pretty formative years as like in adulthood. Mm-hmm. And so that has been just like one of the, I don't know, just greatest honors really is to like share so much of my life with this community and this audience, but it has changed over the years. And there are going to be people, again, that are along for the ride and the changes and the progress and the transformation. And then there are going to be people that are like, where's 5 things? You used to do that in 2008 and you don't do that anymore. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. But like, I just also, it's one of those things that like as a perfectionist and people pleaser, that for far too long, there have been things that I've held on to that haven't served me or the business. Right. And, and the other challenge has been, I used to do 5 blog posts a week and that was it. Now I basically have like a 24/7 like newsreel of my life on stories and then also in feed and then also on the blog. And so with each edition of social media, there has just been extra pressure to like create more. And so I have had to create certain boundaries as well, both again, professionally and personally. But I want to be able to go out to dinner with my family and just be fully present, put my phone down and not capture all of it.
I'm curious, we talk about social media and like it's crazy like where it's gotten in such a short amount of time, and there's so much. I don't want to call it noise because that sounds super negative, but there's just a lot going on. Like a lot of people, and it's great. Like everyone has a voice, everyone can share.
What's a good word for that? Noise.
Okay. I guess it's a lot of noise, but there's a lot going on, and I'm curious, because back then you talk about like with blogging there weren't as many people, so it's a little bit easier maybe to stand out, and no discredit to you, but it was just like
100%.
It's such an important thing to note, and I think so now, like for example, if someone, let's say you just have a taste in something, or you just like have an eye for something or whatever, do you think like naturally being able to stand out is enough, or like what would you have done if you were starting now is kind of my question.
Gosh. I mean, to your point, I do believe in timing and luck because I really just jumped in at a time where it was just like really starting. But, I think the same core tenets apply now as they did back then. It's just so much more saturated. Like it's a really busy space. And so, but I still believe that there is always room for wonderful content and things that are unique and different. And, like I kind of think like the cream rises to the top sort of thing. And that you might have to, in the same way that I did like SEO stuff by like commenting, like I'm sure there are new ways that people should be doing that, whether it's like on TikTok or that kind of thing. But, just again, to bet on yourself and kind of try to figure out like what the perspective is that you're bringing that is slightly unique or that's missing in
right, because to your point earlier about people saying like, oh, I feel like I grew up with you, it's almost like who can build the strongest community online, because you can create like viral content and it can do really well, it rises to the top, but then it could fall even faster because there's no like substance to it.
Something that I always think about with influencers and just folks that are spending a lot of time on social media and creating content is obviously there's a lot of positives that we've discussed, but I think it's also important for those that are listening to understand some of the challenges and the perhaps cons and negatives, with the space. And one of the things that I think about is just like mental health, right? Whether it's anxiety, depression, just feeling like you're not enough, perhaps. And one of the things, and I thought about this recently with the whole Instagram, Facebook shutdown, which, by the way, I thought was great for a little bit because it gave me like a little bit of time away.
So much done.
Yeah, I'm gonna run for California governor on the premise that all social media companies need to shut down for once a week, 4 hours a day.
Great,
just do some work, blackout, more productive, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm curious with you. What are some of the challenges that you do deal with or that you have dealt with being on social media or having a big core part of your business being based on this platform or several of these platforms?
Yeah. I mean, I know we don't have a ton of time, but like that
quick
is
and dirty.
Yeah. I mean, I would say A is like creating boundaries because my life, all of it can be content. What I'm having for breakfast, what I'm wearing, how I do my makeup, like what my daughter is drawing, like anything and everything. And sometimes even the messier, the better, just because like people, it's a way to feel connected with people. And in the beginning, when I first started, like it was everything in 2008 was curated and glossy. People don't want that. They want to see the real you. They want to feel like they're connecting. But so, creating those boundaries and setting limits and having things that are strictly just for myself or my family, just so that I'm not constantly just on my phone. And then I would also say, just like unsolicited feedback. Some of it is advice. I mean, I remember when I became a mother, like that was, I had never seen anything like that. And, to people saying like, I hate what you're wearing, or I don't like this, like the unsolicited feedback can, again, what you said, the word noise. But I think that maintaining a perspective of, being able to hear criticism when it is worthy and to say, okay, got it. Let me think about that a bit, make changes if need be. But then also to realize that when you're getting negative feedback that isn't necessarily based on reality and it's just someone's opinion or they're trying to tear you down, just that this is all through screens. And if you put your phone down, if you shut your computer, that like, that's not your real life. And so I think kind of maintaining that perspective has been helpful, that I'm like, oh, I'm going to go downstairs and have a glass of wine with my husband or go out to dinner with friends. I'm like, that's what actually matters. So yeah, and then I think just like the whole imposter syndrome, again, it's like, even people who feel, or at least appear to see that they have it all figured out, don't, and I think you don't recognize that because it's not often talked about on social media and whatnot. But just for anyone listening, and perhaps this will be a good reminder even to my future self, that it's like no one has everything figured out and we're all just kind of like flailing as we go.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe no one has anything figured out. It's like, it's everyone is kind of just, because I feel like the world is changing so much, and there's just so much going on now that you could have never even fathomed like 10 years ago.
One of the main things that a lot of folks are asking us to ask you, and something that was also on our minds, was why sell other products versus make your own? Kind of like the mindset behind that, like both from a personal point of view and also just a business strategy. Why that decision?
For our e-commerce?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are several reasons. Number one, we carry products in our shop that we absolutely love and that I stand by, that I have like handpicked, and I can't make all of them,
right?
And so it makes sense to then find those brands and those other categories and fill, our shop with all of the things that I love the most. The other thing is we took the 15% pledge to have 15% of our counter space dedicated to Black-owned brands. That means a lot to me, I think it's kind of nice not to just then, when I'm selling products, to be like, hey, I made this, you should buy it. Hey, I made this. Like to say like, hey, this is a brand I don't know if you know about, but I love their stuff.
Right.
And we're going to sell that as well. So I think it creates like, again, that kind of sort of authentic, place where people can shop for everything that I love, that it's not just all made by me.
Right. What do you see the next, 5 years of, your company looking like?
We're going to continue to expand into the direct-to-consumer products. So similar to what we did with our jewelry, that's been an enormous success and something I am just so passionate about and excited by. And so continuing to explore other products that still feel in line kind of with the Cupcakes and Cashmere brand, and things that I'm just, that I love naturally, that we would want to kind of create our own.
You talked about the name early on, but like, is there like a story behind that, or how did you even come up with that?
It took about a week, but I literally was like, I wanted to have two things that encapsulated what I was going to primarily be writing about. Like fashion and food were kind of the main things. I wanted it to be alliterative so that people kind of remembered it. And I wanted it to stand out so that I was like, oh, I feel like any girl who hears the words Cupcakes and Cashmere, she'll be like, sign me up. I love both.
Yeah, it's I love the name. It's great.
Awesome time, yeah.
All done?
I'm good, yeah.
All right, well, Emily, this has been really fun.
I have a lot of questions, but I know we're...
I know,
I want to keep it... No, it's not your fault. I'm looking there, too. I'm like, we got to keep it under 60 minutes.
Well, it's been really fun. I mean, just hearing your story is incredible, but like, I love kind of all these anecdotes and things that you share, like wisdom that you share, because I think it's super relevant to anyone who's trying to build something out of pretty much nothing, right? Like, it's almost like you can envision something or have an idea, and to your point on betting on yourself, like that's the first step. If you just believe in yourself, then there's no reason why you shouldn't pursue whatever idea you have, because there's plenty of people out there that don't believe in themselves, and that's unfortunate, and I hope people can like get to that point. But I think like people think that there should be anything more than that, and I think the first step is you believe in yourself, like you have conviction. Why not, right?
Yeah,
so
100%.
So thank you so much, and we can't wait to see what happens next with you and the business, and thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.